This is the 2024 Lexus LC 500 Cabriolet, and this car has a lot of great things going for it. Beautiful styling, naturally aspirated V8, gorgeous interior, all of that has been true since this car came out like 6 years ago. But the 24 LC has been updated with some important new changes, and I think they make this version absolutely the one to have. Today, I'll review the LC 500 Cabriolet and explain why, and show you all of this car's quirks and features. Today's video is sponsored by Cars and Bids, which is my online car auction website for modern enthusiast cars. So far, Cars and Bids has hosted more than 20,000 car auctions of special, cool, and interesting cars like this, and this, and this, and this. So, if you're looking to buy or sell an enthusiast car, do it on Cars and Bids. All right, time for the quirks and features of the LC 500. Starting with a brief overview, namely an explanation. This is Lexus's luxury performance convertible. You probably don't associate the Lexus brand with performance or convertibles, but they do have this. Now, there are many great things about the Lexus LC 500, especially for the 24 model year, but the greatest is this engine. The LC 500 has a 5-liter naturally aspirated V8 with about 470 horsepower and about 400 pound-feet of torque. One of the last great NA V8 engines to exist in the entire car world is installed in this car. It's great on paper, the numbers are fantastic, and it sounds pretty good too. Take a listen. Now, this car is also offered in hybrid form. They sell something called the LC 500H that has a hybrid V6 with about 350 horsepower. Do not get this engine. No matter what you do, don't get that powertrain. It's more efficient, but you lose the primary benefit of this car, which is one of the very last NA V8s in the entire car world, and a great one at that. Skip the LC 500H, please. And beyond the powertrain, there are other great benefits of this car. For one thing, it's rear-wheel drive. You could totally see Lexus coming out with a luxury performance convertible and then making it front-wheel drive, negating any enthusiast interest in the car. But that's not the case here, rear-wheel drive, and it's absolutely beautiful. The LC 500 is a gorgeous car. Every line, every angle, it is truly fantastically designed, a beautiful and truly desirable car. You turn your head and look every time you see one on the street. It's amazing that Lexus gave us the LFA supercar, which was not particularly attractive, and then years later came out with this, much more beautiful for far less money. The LFA may still be the cool sporty Lexus, but this is the nice looking one. But all of these things have been true about the Lexus LC since it came out back in 2018. It's always had the NA V8, it's always been rear-wheel drive, and it's always been beautiful. So, you're thinking, why am I watching this crap? Why don't I just go turn on Throttle House? Well, the answer is the newest LC, the 2024 model, has received one tremendously important upgrade: the infotainment system. Now again, before you switch over to Thomas and James, let me tell you why this is important. Since the LC first came out 6 years ago, it has used Lexus's remote touch interface, which is the single worst piece of automotive equipment perpetrated on the consumer since the hand crank starter. Basically, it was like a computer mouse that you had to move around to select things, while all other vehicles were making do with touchscreens where you just tap on something. In the Lexus LC and similar Lexus models, you would have to scroll around on a little trackpad and perfectly click on what you were looking for while also driving down the road. It was terrible, total trash, the worst infotainment system in the history of the car industry, including those really early BMW ones where the screen had about 11 pixels and 3 colors. Finally, they have ditched it. Other Lexus models have gotten rid of remote touch over the last few years, and I wasn't sure if that change was going to make its way into the LC because, well, this car isn't very popular. But for 24, it now has a touchscreen. Lexus's terrible infotainment is gone, and it is replaced with a sensible, reasonable situation. And you gotta figure this won't last for very long. The Lexus LC has not exactly been a strong seller. It's an expensive car with a narrow market segment, and frankly, it's had 6 years of sales to already take place. Now we're down to the very end of the production run. You have to assume Lexus won't let this car go on much longer, and we finally got the good technology. So I say this is the one to have because it finally has great tech. It's the end of the line. It's going to be low production, low volume. This is the special one. And in 20 years, when we're talking about the Lexus LC and its big NAV8, people are always going to say, well, you know, you got to get a 24 or later car in order to have the best one. That's this, and this will be the best one. Now, if you want it, of course, it's going to be pricey. The coupe with a fixed roof starts around $100,000. This car, the convertible, starts around $106,000. Not cheap, but a lot of great benefits in this car, especially now. So now that we've established this is a desirable car, let's go through its quirks and features, starting with getting inside. You walk up, you can see the door handle is flush with the body. You unlock the doors, the door handle pops out and reveals a Lexus logo that had been hidden until then, which is kind of cool. Next, you open up the door, and in this particular LC, you can see one of the most beautiful interiors in any Japanese car. Frankly, in just about any car on sale today. An absolutely gorgeous layout, but also the colors in here are fantastic. These cream white seats with these royal blue accents and the spider web-like stitching on the seats. Everything looks really beautiful in here. Very cool and very high-end. This interior is part of a new upgrade that Lexus is offering on the 24 LC called a bespoke build interior. You can see the plaque here that says Lexus Bespoke Build. The thinking is you get more personalization and customization options so you can go wild with your interior and make it beautiful and change colors and stitching to your heart's content. And this car displays some of what's possible. It looks fantastic. But beyond the colors and the stitching in this interior, just the regular materials that you get in every Lexus LC are absolutely fantastic. You can see in the center control stack here this beautiful sort of platinum chrome that just looks great, a lot better than plastic or aluminum. It's a gorgeous look, and they have it all throughout the center console. You can see near the shift lever this gorgeous look and feel material in here. I also love how the door handles are just sort of floating on the door panel. They're not integrated into the design. Instead, this platinum-like husk just sort of sticks out and you grab it to get out of the car. It looks very cool. Even the glove box opener button in this car is attractive and gentle. You press it and without a sound, the glove box is delivered. It's a very beautiful feeling, even something as stupid and simple as opening up the glove box. This interior really is fantastic. But there are many more quirks to cover here, so let's start with the dial next to the gauge cluster that's sort of sticking out from the gauge cluster shroud. You can see it here. This is your drive mode dial, and the cool thing about this is when you adjust it, the gauge cluster screen adjusts in a pretty cool way. You go from normal to sport. You can see here it gets sportier, then you go into Sport Plus, and it gets even sportier still, which is pretty neat. The other neat thing is if you switch it the other direction to go into Comfort and Eco, it also changes in those modes, and Eco even replaces the engine temperature gauge with an Eco dial, as you can see. But the coolest thing about the gauge cluster in this car it moves. Check this out. This button on the steering wheel, you push it, and then the gauge cluster moves over to provide you with a new screen that gives vehicle information and various different readouts and settings that you can change. Press it again, and the cluster moves back into the center. This is not just some screen that's moving around. It is a physical dial that's moving in place, which is so cool. Lexus first had this in the LFA supercar, and since then it's trickled down into some other sporty models like this and the IS Sports Sedan, and it is just a cool feature and a wonderful quirk. Now, also worth pointing out, the switch over on the other side of the gauge cluster, this will put you in snow mode if you want, or turn on and off your traction control. But anyway, next we move into the center console here, which is largely the same as the previous Lexus LC, although you lose that trackpad, like I had mentioned, that you had for the remote touch system, since we've now moved on to a touch screen. Otherwise, fairly similar, fairly familiar controls from the old LC in here, although unquestionably the weirdest one is the control for the heated seats. To turn on your heated seats, you press a button right here, and then that brings up a menu in the screen that lets you turn the heated seats on or off. If you're gonna include a heated seat button, just let me push the button to turn on the heated seats. Come on, Lexus. Why turn this into a two-step process, especially since you already have a button? They were so close to getting it, and then they didn't. They gave you the physical button, but you still have to use the screen. Now, fortunately for the climate control, that is not integrated into the screen, never has been in a Lexus LC. Instead, you have it here below the screen with these nice sort of platinum chrome switches, which are all very luxurious to press and to look at. And of course, it means no stupid menus to go through here for your climate control. Now, speaking of the climate system, one unusual item in this car is the climate vents. You can see one to the left of the steering wheel, fairly standard, one to the right on the passenger side, also standard. In the middle, you only have one vent, which isn't that unusual. It's a fairly small car, small interior. You don't need more, but you have more. Above the glove box, you can see two more climate vents, meaning that the passenger side of this interior has 3, and if they wanted to use the center one, 4. Seems like a little bit of climate vent overkill in a convertible, but that's what they've done, so that's how it is. Now, back to the center console here. A couple of other interesting things. For one, the cup holder, clearly an afterthought. It's located here under this panel. You push it, open it up, you only have one cup holder, and it's pretty small, but there is a second hidden cup holder. Check this out. If you move the center armrest back, push this down and move it back, you have another cup holder here. It's square, but you can stick a drink in here if you need to, in a pinch, if you have 2 cups that need holding. Also in this center console area, you have a button marked view with a camera on it. Unfortunately, it pulls up the stupidest camera view in history, where a camera like floats around the LC with an egg shape and you can't position it where you want. This is Lexus's version of a 3D camera. It's terrible compared to other brands where you can swipe and exactly show what you want to see. This is what the LC has. Hey, at least it's not in the remote touch controller screen anymore. Now, the really neat party trick in this center console is the power top operation, which is hidden under this little mound. It looks like this is just a hand rest where you'd stick your hand while you're controlling, say, the stereo volume or the track or turning on the heated seats. But below this hand rest, you flip it up, and there's your power top control. And you push that button, and it's pretty simple. The top goes up. And as you can see, it's quite fast. It goes up unusually quickly for basically any convertible. Even though this is a somewhat large car, it's a small top. It doesn't cover that much area, and it just goes up, and then it's in place. And same deal when you want to put it down. Just push the switch in the other direction. The top unlatches itself and goes down as quickly as possible. Very speedy process, and you can do it while you're driving as long as you're going a fairly slow speed. Now, the other control that's hidden under this little panel is this button, which which will raise or lower all of the windows at once. This is fantastic. You push it up and all of the windows go up, the two front windows and the little windows for the back seats. This can be helpful if you just put up the roof, it started raining, you don't have to individually put up all the windows. One button will do it all. And it can be useful if you just put the roof down and you want all the windows down at once, push that button and they all go down. Or of course, if you're transitioning from street driving to the freeway with the top down, you want the windows up for less wind noise, well, you can do that. It is a very cool feature to have one button that can raise or lower all of the windows. But anyway, other quirks in this interior. For one thing, the gear selector is a bit unusual. If you want to put the car into drive, you move it to the left, so towards you in the driver's seat, and then down, and you're in drive. If you want to go into reverse, you move it to the left and then up, and you're in reverse, and neutral is just straight to the left. If you want to engage manual mode, you pull it down when you're in drive, and then you can manually shift using the pedals on the steering wheel. Park is just a button next to all this stuff. It's a fairly standard gear selector situation in Toyota and Lexus models, especially hybrids, but if you're not familiar with it, it can be a little unusual. Also interesting, a little quirky, when you lock the doors, when you press the door lock button, there's a little light mounted on the door panel where a physical door lock would be, and it turns green. You'd think it would turn red to say locked, but instead it turns green, which means lock. Seems a little bit odd, and that light is weird generally, but it's there, a nice little quirk. Now, last thing worth pointing out sitting up front is the infotainment system itself. Like I said, new touchscreen, that's the big news for 24, and frankly, well, it's okay. It's actually not that great of an infotainment system. It does exactly what you'd expect it to. It doesn't really have any crazy, exciting, cool features worth showing off, but it is responsive. It's a large screen, very intuitive to use, very simple, just not particularly exciting or thrilling in any way. Still, dramatically better than what they had before. Next up, let's move on to the back seats, which as you can see are tremendously tiny. These are like the Tinker Toy back seats. It's absolutely laughably small. Nobody could ever possibly dream of getting inside them. They even come with this ridiculously tiny floor mat that almost looks like kind of a joke. But it's there to go along with the ridiculously tiny back seats. Now, a couple of interesting things worth noting. For one, the seat belts come out of the center and then buckled to the side, which is the opposite of how they work in most other cars, including the front seats in this one. So that's kind of an interesting quirk. Now, the seat belts also have a feature where you can pin them to the seat. It uses a magnet and it kind of keeps them in place. I guess because you don't want them flopping around when you're driving fast with the top down, the wind's blowing. And also you would do that because no one will ever actually use these seat belts, so you might as well just kind of keep them in place. Now, the other thing you'll notice back here, it's only two seats, one on each side. You don't have a center seat in the middle. I can only imagine how uncomfortable that would be. Instead, you have a speaker for the Mark Levinson sound system in the middle, which I'm sure provides a great sound experience while your knees are getting crushed. Now, also worth pointing out back here, on the backs of the front headrests, you have the Lexus L embossed into the leather, although I think this is more a commentary on what type of person you are if you're stuck in the back seat of this car. Anyway, the other thing worth noting back here is the wind deflector mounted on top of the back seats. You can see it here. It's a tremendously small piece of glass fixed in place. You can't take it off. You wouldn't think it would do all that much, but they wouldn't have put it there if it didn't. It's supposed to keep wind kind of blowing over the interior and not directly in your face while you're driving with the roof down. Now, and finally, we move outside the Lexus LC to talk through its exterior quirks and features, starting with the taillights, which are very cool. You can see there's like a series of L's, I guess for Lexus, sort of going through the taillights like a 3D image. It's a very cool look when you get up close with one of these and look into the taillights when they're on. I also like the turn signals back here. This vertical turn signal design is very eye-catching, very different from what you might expect in a car like this. And same deal up front. You have a similar vertical turn signal design up here. Again, a little bit head turning, a little bit daring and exciting, lighting, which is kind of cool. I also love the front headlight situation, especially the running light, where you have this LED, it's almost a check mark, kind of starting at the bodywork and then going inside into the lighting cluster. It's a cool element that, again, adds to the neat and sort of daring styling of this car. Finally, last thing worth talking about is the trunk, the cargo area situation. You open up the trunk and you can see, well, it's quite small, actually. Surprisingly small, because this car is one of those ones that old guys take to the golf course, and so they would want to be able to put their clubs in it, but there's not a lot of space. You could probably fit a set of golf clubs in here, but you'll be mashing it down, which nobody really likes to do. So a little bit of a tight trunk situation, but that's the compromise you make to drive around in Lexus LC Beauty. All right, driving the updated 2024 Lexus LC 500. Driving with the roof on right now, just for sound purposes, but I've been driving this car around with the roof off, and it is glorious. It is so nice. Just the wind rushing in this fantastic car that looks great and feels great. So let's get into it. Starting with the powertrain, which is absolutely excellent. This 5-liter naturally aspirated V8 is one of the very last engines of its kind that still exists in the whole world, and boy is it nice. Excellent power on tap. You just drop your foot a little bit and you get a great throttle response, really quick to respond. And the sound is just so good. And there might be piped in sound, I don't know, but it just sounds like an old school NA V8, like exactly what you'd want from a exciting, enjoyable, fun sports car. It's just such a neat place to be. And then the powertrain is a fantastic complement. Roar. Now, I will say that I think the transmission could use a little bit of help. Unless you're deep into a sport mode, it's a little slow to respond, but it is a nice and smooth and comfortable transmission, which is a great benefit. Now, one other nice thing about this car, when you're cruising around, if you got the roof up, you don't really hear all that much going on. Now, it's not Bentley convertible quiet, where somehow you really hear nothing, even though it still has a cloth soft top, but you don't hear much, and so you do have a pretty luxurious experience. The exception is ride quality. It's not that rough, especially if you're in a comfort mode or a custom mode where you've chosen a comfort suspension, but it's not like a Bentley or like an S-Class Cabriolet. This was intended to be a sportier car. It was specifically designed to be sportier, more engaging than your typical Lexus. And so even in its most comfortable setting, it doesn't beat you up, but it's harsher than a luxury car. It doesn't feel like some comfortable thing that's costing you. That isn't really the goal of the Lexus LC. It was supposed to be a sporty car, and it feels like that. And it sounds like that, and it has the power like that. Like, all of the boxes are checked except the brand name. You think 4-seater Lexus convertible, you're gonna be getting a comfortable ride. Well, not quite. I've been driving this around all week here in Southern California, where there's a lot of cars on the road, a lot of special cars, and I haven't seen a single other one. They're just not common. You have a pretty rare and special head-turning and exciting car, and it's gorgeous to look at. Now, one other thing worth noting is the steering with this car, which isn't as sporty as you might be thinking if you're looking at the rest of the specs. The steering is a little slow and a little over-assisted. In that way, they went a little bit more Lexus. And even if you go into Sport Plus mode or a comfort mode with the sportiest steering possible, it's just not that sporty. This car kind of lives in an interesting middle ground between luxury and sport, and it's more on the sporty side, but it's not entirely and completely sport only. And that's definitely clear with like the steering. The handling is pretty good. It stays relatively flat, but it's clear that this car wasn't designed to be a dynamic masterpiece. It is a good car. It is a sporty car, but it is not, you know, a 911, let's put it that way. Although it certainly looks better than a 911. Overall, I'm really impressed with this car. I've always loved the Lexus LC since it first came out, and I first reviewed it in Connecticut like 7 years ago. And I just think this is the best version. And I think it's sad that it's only coming at the very end. We finally got the good infotainment. You know, they finally added a convertible. We still have the NA V8. The convertible came a few years ago, but it wasn't there immediately. Like, they finally got all the ingredients right to just make it as good as humanly humanly possible. It's just a neat combination of things that we probably won't see again, especially considering how sales have gone. The days of these bigger coupes, convertibles, luxury cars are kind of coming to an end in favor of SUVs and sportier vehicles. And so this was a fun thing to have for a few years, and they've now just made it the best version of itself. And I think it's a special car. I think it's a truly special car. And so that's the 2024 Lexus LC 500. This car is special. It's always been special, but now that the infotainment isn't awful, and now that the production numbers are particularly low, this one is especially special. And now it's time to give the updated Lexus LC a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 67 out of 100, which puts the LC 500 convertible at the top of this list of competitors, and with good reason, as this car is really, really desirable. The LC has always been awesome, beautiful, fast, exciting, with a tremendously enjoyable engine, but the updated technology finally solves its only weak spot. Lexus must be frustrated that such a fantastic car has found such a small niche group of buyers, but such is life with cars in this segment these days. Nobody really wants an expensive big coupe or convertible, but if you do, don't buy a new SL, don't buy a new BMW 8 Series, buy a new Lexus LC with the updated infotainment system. This is definitely the best in the business unless you really need the performance and brand name of a Porsche 911.